This is Father Bonaventure Chapman.
And this is Father Gregory Pine.
And welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks for all those who listen and tune in, especially the Patreon supporters. If you'd like to donate to us on Patreon with a monthly donation, you can find information somewhere to do that. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. Father Gregory, how are you?
What's up, Father Bonaventure?
We're going to carry on.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's great.
That was great. The thing that I love about this is, you know how, like, when you do a thing for 6 years, but it still feels like the first time every time?
It's worse than that. I've just noticed recently, like, when you do prayers, for instance, you know, and you end prayers. So we have a practice at the house studies, of course. We have the hebdomadarian, who is the leader of the week.
The
hebdomadarian. The hebdomadarian, that's a word and a half.
If you had the choice to between or among centurion, legionnaire, hebdomadarian, which would you choose as your martial title?
I would choose centurion, I think. Okay. Although hebdomadarian sounds cool, but once you understand what it means, which is just like leading prayers at the week, for the week, it's not as cool as centurion, which I assume is, you know,
you got 100 guys.
You got 100 guys, and not just 100 dudes, but 100 dudes with like armor.
Yeah,
and they're ready.
They are ready.
But as hebdom, which is the short version of this, you have to, lead prayers in front of everyone, the 70 or 80 people, and these are prayers you say every day, like the rosary and the ending of these things, exactly,
with bewildering frequency.
But when you're saying them in front of people, like they can leave you, and you get this cool thing where I say, like,
How would you describe their leaving? They
don't appear.
Okay,
they hide.
So they haven't left. They just weren't there.
They're hiding. They hide in your mind.
In the recesses
They won't
of your
come
mind.
out.
Okay,
and then they send out some of their men. And they like get jumbled up.
Oh, so they're centurions too. They have men in their charge?
Exactly. Not as many though. It's a squad.
Okay, squad.
One of them's got like an M60, so you got exactly.
Nice.
But you get up and so you get up there and you're like, I tell myself like, no, I say the rosary every day.
I lead prayers all the time.
Times. I lead prayers myself all the time. It'll be fine. And then his little voice says, no, you're gonna screw it up. And you're like, this is unnecessary. Yeah. I'm not going to. And then you have a choice between either focusing on the words to fight that voice, or I found you just have to say to yourself, trust habitual knowledge. Yeah. Just start speaking.
Kind of zone out.
Yeah, start zone. Because if I start to,
pretend like you're a patient on a Thorazine drip and just go like.
Exactly.
Forth we beseech you, Lord, thy grace into our heart.
Yeah. If I start thinking, is this the prayer? It's like, no, that's going to be, it's like centipedes thinking about how to move their legs. Tangled up. That's what they tell me.
Yeah. Is that an image from like a philosophical text somewhere?
It is. Okay. I think it's from Camus. I think it's from an existentialist novel. But could be Sartre. Could be
The Plague.
Change. Yeah. I think the Fall, the Deluge, the Grand. One of our professors.
We should have a sub theme, like a sub channel on the Godsplaining channel, which is Father Bonaventure pronounces things in French.
Yeah.
And then we could do like Father Patrick pronounces thing in Ukrainian, because he was a war correspondent, of course. Yeah.
One of my Professor Tobias Hoffman, who taught me Scotus' ethics at CUA. Yeah. He was referring at one point to, we were studying a text on like God's commands and how God does things, and he referred to the Grand Deluge. And it's just like, what is that? And it's like, oh, the Great Flood. I'm like, oh, well, that's just, I take it in French, the Great Flood. But there's something that sounds like the Grand, because, the Grand Flood. Yeah. Sound like that was a grand time we just wiped out.
There were trumpets.
Yeah, but it's great. But it's like
fanfare.
Yeah, so the Grand Deluge. But it's funny also to have a German say it, the Grand Deluge.
It is. Or T.S. Eliot in his inimitable "I'm from St. Louis, but I live in England" accent.
Does he say Grand Deluge?
No, but he speaks of the years l'entre-deux-guerres.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just the years between the wars, or between the two wars. But it sounds better that way. Or worse, depending on whether or not you're allergic to the pronunciation of the French language, which, as it turns out, many Americans are.
Yeah.
I've learned that. When people start speaking French, Americans assume that, like, you're not going to get along.
It's a bad language,
fascinating,
yeah. The French, yep. When we're going to talk...
I don't have that prejudice, that is.
No, who does? Yeah. Some people do. We were going to talk about something else, but instead we'll just jump right into the episode at this point.
Yeah, it seems right.
So, like, obviously, unfortunately, when you speak French, some people will think poorly of you.
Right.
But that's not... You don't intend people to speak poorly of you.
That's a great point.
But, so they're out here saying, wait a minute. Yep. What is going on with... actions that sometimes have side effects that are undesirable. And what do we do with this? This is the doctrine of, for those viewers who know us, the doctrine of double effect.
Yeah.
Wow. What is that?
Well, I think you
who
described,
am I?
Who am exactly.
Why am I here?
A great transition. Okay, so in this epical world historical moment in which we shift from banter to subject matter, let us situate ourselves vis-a-vis the question.
Kind of just pulled the emergency brake on this.
What
that was
is
one of the hardest
episode?
This is one of the, I think, the hardest lens. I mean, this was just barely not smashing into a tree because you don't want to push the brake pedal.
You may as well just say, I haven't slept in a week.
Basically true.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, it's tremendous. Okay, so people are out there asking about the doctrine and or principle of double effect.
This can't be true.
People are asking in droves.
Okay.
They're asking in hordes. I think there are people knocking on the window of this recording studio at present, asking us.
Keep them out.
Demanding that we supply them with a response.
All right, we better help them.
Satisfy the people's needs. The people are asking.
Father Gregory, let's satisfy the people.
Okay, so we call it the doctrine or the principle of double effect because we're concerned about an action which produces two effects, okay, or a double effect, a twofold effect. And the idea is typically that there's something that you desire and something that you don't desire. And the question is whether or not it's permissible to produce that effect that you don't desire when that effect that you don't desire can bring pretty negative consequences into the world.
Let's give a simple example of this.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say
or
that,
decision, then talk about how it applies. Yeah. What's an example and then how it applies? Yeah. Good.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, so let's do like a complicated example in the mountains because
Bingo.
Why not have a simple example in the valley when you can do a complicated example in the mountains? Okay, let's say that you and I are hiking.
Yep.
There's some alpinism involved here. We're going up and over things which are sheer. Yeah, mountaineering.
Yeah.
We're going up and over some things that are sheer, covered
Yes.
with ice. We're wearing crampons. We're using ice axes, which in French are called pirolets. And at a certain point, I slip. I'm connected to you, all right? So I slip, and I'm exerting an incredible amount of pressure on your back / your body. And I'm hanging over this like vast chasmic void. And if I fall, I will fall to my death. And I'm down there being like, it's okay. I've been looking for a good night's sleep for the last 36 years. Yeah, so the question is, can we get ourselves out of this pickle? And it seems like we can't because the weight of my body is so, what's a cool adjectival form of weight? So weighty. Whew.
Yeah.
Gosh, got through that. That you can't advance, but you also can't go backwards either because then both of us will be lost into the void. So I have a choice. I can choose to free you from your burden.
Yep.
All right, so I can take my little handy-dandy Swiss Army knife and get to cutting. It's going to take me a while. But I can cut you loose.
Yeah.
In the recognition that I will fall to my death. And that's not an act of suicide, because what I have done is I have willed to remove you from a burden which will keep you from making your way up and over the mountain and back to a place of safety, in recognition that I will die, but that I can will the saving of you, foresee the dying of me, and choose that uprightly. That is to say, without sin or without any moral culpability.
Yeah. Now, listeners and viewers, you might have thought this was just an episode. This was an example taken from Endgame or something with Scarlett Johansson or what have you. But I think actually, I suspect this is from our Bachelor of Sacred Theology comps exams.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we had the same examiner,
We did.
and I always remember this question from our examiner, which was basically this one. And I've always remembered, like, can I cut you off? But of course, it's you. Different question.
It is different questions. I was just trying to put you in a non-binding sitch.
Exactly. Yeah. Well. No pun intended.
Take the blame.
So no, I do think it matters to those things. But we're not going to that. The point is that it does make a nice example of how there are actions have multiple effects to them.
Yeah.
And the question is, some actions are doable. They're allowed to be done morally. And there are other actions that aren't. But sometimes they come in like a package deal on how to navigate that. Now, most of us aren't mountaineering, for instance. Right? But in our daily lives, we do come into a lot of actions where we do have side effects to these sort of things, right? So in the most extreme case, I suppose, when you have a child, you have now brought someone into the world who will die. But you don't intend, right?
This is the most existential formulation of the principle of double effect that I've heard today.
Yeah, and Anscombe uses this as her example. She goes, well, if you don't want a weird one, we could do something else. But this one's very clear, right? Like you've brought someone in the world who will die, and so but you don't intend that person to die, right? And you can say, well, then why did you bring them into existence? And you're like, well, no, that's just what it means to be. It's included.
Yeah.
But also with simple things like, for instance, if you buy a cup of coffee at a certain place, like a Starbucks or something, it will also have effects that you might not want.
Right.
Like, for instance, when you hand that money over, then it will go into a fund. That fund might support a cause that you don't particularly want or incline to or something.
Correct.
And so then you say, well, and then we start thinking about this. A lot of life has these aspects that have, well, there's a good part to what I'm doing, a bad part. And you might think, oh, well, how do I decide which one of those I can do, right? And you might think initially, well, I guess I just kind of weigh out the quantity of goodness and badness, but that's nonsense. So the doctrine of double effect and how it's used is to deal with these cases of saying, hey, we're going to have to deal with cases where you have bad results and bad side effects to some good actions, right? In the military, this has to happen all the time, right? Or just in self-defense, for instance.
Sure.
All these cases. So a lot of these cases, and we try to think, well, how do we work through this? So how do we apply this doctrine? How do we use the idea of, okay, well, we've got the idea of there's side effects, and it seems crazy not to take them into account. We could have an absolutist view and say, well, if there's any bad effect whatsoever, then we don't do the action. But that would
paralyze us in many set of circumstances. Yeah.
We could have another principle that said, I guess we just do whatever.
Yeah.
Because it's too hard. Because it's always going to be bad.
Yeah, we do what like maximizes or optimizes the amount of like good in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, or just we don't even care because there's going to be bad effects and all bad is the same.
Sure, the
so
nihilistic hedonist,
right? But we say, oh no, both those seem crazy.
It seems that way.
So let's find what is this?
Okay,
how do we think through
Let's do some principles.
Give us some cool principles.
So a lot of this kind of body of meditation arises from a particular text of St. Thomas Aquinas. So we know his big book of theology, the Summa Theologiae, is divided into. It's up there. It's divided into 4 parts. One of which parts is called the second part of the second part. And so in that, you have a description of the virtue of justice, and then you get into the kinds of justice. One kind of justice is commutative justice, the justice of exchange. Usually if we think about it in terms of like buying, selling, loaning. But St. Thomas will also, when he's describing the vices opposed to commutative justice, he'll describe ways in which we infringe upon the person or the reputation or the possessions of another. And so when talking about how we infringe upon the integrity of another's person, he describes killing. And in that, he asks, so this is
commutative injustice.
Yeah,
I love
commutative
that.
injustice, an involuntary commutative injustice. So in
ICJ.
So in question 64, article 7, he asks whether you can kill in self-defense.
Yes.
And the idea is that, let's say, theoretically, you're brandishing a weapon of some sort. It's important what kind of weapon, but at present, let's take it as a halberd, like that big thing that the Swiss Guard carries around. So a kind of like swinging, stabbing, whatever. You can also use it to stir up a fire. Yeah, okay, both. Yeah, you have both, one in each hand.
Actually, it's a halberd with a chainsaw attached.
It's a halberd with a chainsaw attached.
It's a chainsaw made of halberds.
Nice. Oh, it's like those tree trimming companies.
Bingo.
You know how they have those things where they go and they get the limbs way up high? It's basically a chainsaw halberd. So you've got one of those.
Yeah, you're in bad shape, my friend. This is not going well for you.
Things are looking bad. And you're charging. You have, so there are like trumpets involved, fanfare. It's like, and you're like, you got the thing coming at me.
It sure looks like.
And on the basis of this, let's say that we have no prior connection. And let's say that you're wearing a clown costume.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm looking and I'm thinking, this is a crazy person. Because he's charging me with a deadly weapon. Accompanied by trumpets and fanfare in a way that I find totally, totally terrifying, but also animating because it's time right now to defend my life.
Yes.
And let's say that I have
we're defending
one of those like blow darts, and the darts are covered in poison from the back of a tree frog, so like this deep Amazonian wonder.
Blue one,
And I've been training, actually, recreationally, no intent to kill, but I've been training my blow dart skills for some time. And so I see you coming, and I think, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stop this guy in any way, but for the blow darts. I might try like diplomacy while you're 200 yards away. It's like, this is a bad idea, and you just keep coming.
It's that halberd's like 12 feet long. So.
Yeah. And you're also wearing, like, over top your clown costume, you're wearing an Olympic singlet, and it's from the Jamaican the Jamaican Olympic team.
Did you say over top of
over top of your clown suit? It's a very capacious singlet. And you've still got, like, your bib number from the last Olympics in which you participated. So I've pretty near dread certainty that you're a faster individual than I am.
Yeah.
We're also in the Serengeti, and so, like, there's nothing around in any direction except for, like, grass. Yes. And potentially gazelles, but they're not going to help me. So it's like, how am I going to repulse this attacker?
Yeah.
The basic idea is this. I'm more responsible for my life than I am for your life.
Mm-hmm.
All right? I'm more responsible for safeguarding my bodily integrity than your bodily integrity. Mm-hmm. And it is within bounds, justly so, within bounds to defend my life from unjust aggressors. Mm-hmm. And I can use whatever a kind of proportionate amount of force as is called for in the circumstances in order to achieve that end.
Yes.
All right? So I shouldn't go to town. You know, like, let's say there's a small child who's wielding a blunt pencil saying, I'm going to get you. I should be like, stop. I shouldn't be like, beat, you know? So it should be a proportionate amount of force, not inordinate, not over the top. But in this case, I would be justified to use lethal force so as to repulse the attacker who might otherwise visit death upon me. Mm-hmm. St. Thomas doesn't use all of those details.
But no, it's his is a little more, yeah. So the idea is that you can't intend my death directly.
No.
Of course. But you can intend to use the proper force that's available to protect your own life, to repel the attack. Right.
I can't murder, but I can kill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the difference is between, well, murder is you are killing an innocent person, whereas killing is defending yourself in the situation against someone who is an unjust aggressor. So
Exactly.
that someone's committing something against you. Right. Now, that seems... Well, you've got a book there.
Yeah, I've got the passage. It might be worth reading just 5 sentences.
Let's read it out there for a second.
Here we go. Nothing hinders one act from having 2 effects, only one of which is intended. So that'd be intending your own self-defense or defense of oneself against an unjust aggressor, while the other is beside the intention. That, in this case, would be the death of the aggressor.
Yep.
Now, moral acts take their species, like they take their shape or they take their kind of quality
Basic
or
form,
kind, according to what is intended. So that's primary. And not according to what is beside the intention, since this is accidental. Accordingly, the act of self-defense may have 2 effects. One is the saving of one's life. The other is the slaying of the aggressor. Therefore, this act, since one's intention is to save one's own life, is not unlawful, seeing that it is natural to everything to keep itself in being as far as possible. And yet, though proceeding from a good intention, an act may be rendered unlawful if it be out of proportion to the end. Wherefore, if a man in self-defense uses more than necessary violence, it will be unlawful, whereas if he repel force with moderation, his defense will be lawful, because, according to the jurists, it is lawful to repel force by force, provided one does not exceed the limits of a blameless defense.
Right.
So
yeah. So you respond.
That's the basic shape. There's more there, but
yeah,
that's
it's
the
great.
basic
And
shape.
I like the intention business because it's nice to make the double effect principle. It sounds like the 2 effects, the causes, but we care about the moral evaluation of your own acts, which the intention gives that shape, as you say.
Yep.
And so you can think about the difference between the intention versus foreseen.
Yeah.
So you foresee even, right, that you will blow dart me to death.
Right.
Right. I'm gonna die. You're not intending to blow dart me to death.
Yeah.
You're intending to stop me from killing you because I'm unjustly aggressing you.
Yeah.
Getting up in your grill.
Exactly.
With previous aforementioned chainsaw halberd.
Chainsaw halberd.
But you foresee that unless otherwise, unless I have other superpowers, like I can survive, I've been playing with these same poison arrow darts. You know, and the little frogs and such, because I'm keeping them in, it's like my mouth and kind of
like
playing
the Princess
around with
Bride.
them. Kind of, yeah, you know, like they're kind of throat lozenges.
Right.
And so I've been using them and, you know, not killing them, just kind of hang around.
Yeah.
So like it will only paralyze me or stop me. It will actually be, and you'd be delighted with that. But
I would not be upset.
Exactly, because you've stopped.
I regret the fact that I'm going to have to kill an Olympic sprinter.
Exactly, you think so, yeah, exactly. Now, but so it's just like, for instance, whenever I walk somewhere, you might say, why are you destroying your shoes? And I could say, what? And you say, well, when you walk, you wear them out.
Yeah.
So why are you wearing them out? And I say, well, I don't intend to wear them out. I would be absolutely delighted if my shoe soles never wore out.
Yeah.
I intend to go from here to there with shoes.
Yeah.
It's a foreseen fact that, yeah, they're going to wear out.
Yeah.
That's just what they do. But I would be delighted if they didn't for some reason. Now, what about this case? I've got said halberd thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I just intend to swing that in a space near me to practice my motions. Now, it's true, your body happens to be in said space, but that's just foreseen.
Right.
But it's not intended. I intend merely to swing that halberd back in that sort of space. And just like the shoes, just like the, the death or sort of thing, like I foresee, it's probably, I mean, I'd be delighted if you didn't like split in half. But like I'm just intending.
I was in my swinging space. I was in your swinging space.
Exactly. I'm just intending to be in the swinging space.
So this is like what's distinctive about human activity or human agency is that reason is decisive. Okay, so we can describe an act according to its physical contours, but we have to take into account the human element, or we're just performing like emotional or psychological gymnastics. So the question is like, what's actually taking place? We begin by observing in a kind of third-person way, like what is it that's happening here? But we have to understand like what is the intrinsic or interior logic of the activity. What does it entail? What is kind of born in its very DNA so that we can account for the whole of it? Because if we under-describe an action, we'd end up just deceiving ourselves. So like we as human beings are responsible for informing ourselves, for informing our consciences, for growing in virtue, right? So developing those habits in mind of heart, which make us better human beings. And also for like trying to account for ways in which our human activity can be interrupted or derailed so that we live better. The point is that we get progressively better, not so that we can be like, I am a Superman of moral achievement, but so that we can know and love the Lord and live peaceably in his community, etc. And so our moral activity takes account for takes account of the human factors. So when you wield a deadly weapon, you're responsible for knowing how to responsibly. You're responsible for knowing how to wield a deadly weapon in a human context. You can't just say like, I was just discharging a firearm. That's why people are so insistent about gun safety, because it can, when wielded by a human operator, deal death. And so we should be conscious of the death-dealing capacity for these instruments or implements, and that needs to be incorporated in a human culture as human reason makes the decisive contribution. So it's an under-description and a deceptive under-description to say, I was just swinging the thing. Whenever you're swinging a deadly implement, you're responsible for your surroundings and for the types of things which might arise, which you as a human person can foresee. Maybe not those things that you can't foresee, like... Turns out, like, there were people playing hide and seek on the gun range. It's like you couldn't possibly have foreseen that because those people are nuts and it's illegal and they're stupid. It's like, but you could have foreseen that there were, like people on the cul-de-sac when you were shooting your firearm like directly into the sky, or so you thought, but at a slight angle such that the bullets came down and hit a body. So I think that like the contribution of human reason within the setting of a human culture, we need to take account of the act in its integrity rather than under-describing it or fancifully describing it.
Yeah, I think that's right. Bringing the whole thing to the sense of like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why this as an action? And if you got a deadly weapon, then that means it brings in a whole set of considerations based on the deadliness of the weapon that obviously everyone knows, well, you should be careful with deadly weapons. Right. I think that's right. I use example in class of if it's like hunting season and you have one of your students, one of your friends likes to dress up like a deer and make deer noises and in the forest or something, and you shoot said deer, looks like said deer, and you get up to it and you're like, oh my gosh, it turns out it was John, and I told John not to do this, and John's like laying there, he's going, got you, and it's like, like what's wrong with you? Like you didn't murder that
with his little deer lips.
You killed that person, but like because you would not be. Now, of course, St. Thomas has this fun part. You get up there and you go, ooh, darn, I
was hoping to kill
John. And what a great opportunity. Then you're in trouble. But I think we should finish on two parts. One. Where people would see this. Most people are not going to see like halberd swinging, chainsaw events, or even like John the deer guy. Like I just think that's probably not likely. So where do you think people where do you think people would see this? And then maybe and then why it's important, like why it really matters. Because maybe we'll start with this. You might think this sounds like a bunch of Jesuits doing rationalization, right? You might say double effect is kind of a creepy way to get out of situations, right? So, like, why is this essential or important to the moral life? And then, where would you see it? These might be related because one's an example of a principle in that way. What would you say about that?
So, on my estimation, moral evaluation is moral formation. like how you evaluate moral activity will contribute to your upbuilding as a moral person. So if you say to yourself, like, I can basically do whatever maximizes or optimizes the consequences or effects, you become a consequentialist, maybe even a proportionalist if you're taking into account proportional or gravity. And then that begins to kind of propagate through the entirety of your character. It enters into the way that you think, the way that you choose, the way that you live your life more broadly.
Yeah.
So I think that if you get the moral evaluation straight, you are free then to undertake the moral formation more healthily. So I think, like, often enough you'll hear double effect described as, like on the basis of 4 principles.
Okay.
The activity has to be good, right? So like when we think about the exercise of our human agency, we're about good things, or we ought to be about good things.
Yep.
Then the second thing is we intend the good effect and not the evil effect, right?
Talked
So it's
about
just
the
elaboration.
intention versus foreseen.
Exactly. And we don't get the good through the evil, right? And that's just straight biblical principles right there. It's like, I can't do evil that good might come. All right? So the ends don't justify the means. We're not like kind of technicians of reality trying to produce certain results.
Yep, you
We
can't.
are within the setting of God's providence, abandoned thereunto, disposed to its fulfillment. And we need to be faithful. We need to be hopeful. We need to be loving if we're going to conduct ourselves through life in appropriate fashion. And then the last is there's got to be a grave proportionate reason, or a proportionate reason of a grave sort. So it's like you don't just undertake this for whatsoever reason. It's the type of thing where like lives are on the line, or like people are on the line. And so I think that in getting this evaluation right, we have a clearer sense of our own moral formation. It's like, okay, I might not be successful in the way that the world esteems success, or I might not optimize or maximize in the way in which my business associates esteem optimizing and maximizing, but that's not the point of human life. The point of human life is to know and love the Lord and to mature our agency so that we can get better at that within the setting of our family, our polity, our church, etc. So I think that like often enough, we're going to be making small decisions about like when do you like replace the transmission on your car? It sounds real bad. Who's endangered by your bad transmission? Is it just the people inside the car? Is it the people outside the car? It's like we're going to be making decisions on the basis of tight budgets, and we're trying to refine the timing. There's no optimal, there's no maximal answer to this, but the question is, how can I as a human being undertake this well so as to do it virtuously, or more and more virtuously with each passing day, with each passing week, with each passing month, whatever. And so I think that, it's like, it's the type of thing where we're not going to have too many alpinism, we're not going to have too many chainsaw halberd instances, but nevertheless, we're going to be making decisions as to what's good for my family, what's good for my polity, what's good for my church. And I think we want to be able to like think through that well so that we can do so freely.
Yeah, I also think I get this from Anscombe, Liz Anscombe, great moral philosopher in the 20th century, who says that if you don't make this kind of distinction, if you don't understand double effect, and then it's intentional, the intention versus the foreseen, or what Thomas calls the outside the intention, then you're going to give up on the principle of having norms that are absolute. So like 10 Commandment kind of norms or something. Like, for instance, you shall not murder under any circumstance, right? If you don't have a principle that distinguishes between intentions and foreseen, and merely foreseen things, then you're just looking at the effects, and that's going to determine things. But that means that you're going to have to cough up any notion of any principled absolute norms, like I don't kill innocent people, because sometimes innocent people might die, are effects of, war, or effect of just war, or effect of other things. And then you don't want to say, oh, I guess I don't believe in absolute morality. I don't believe in absolute things that like, just categorical imperatives or commandments or something, right? Because there are these effects. Rather, the distinction allows you, and it forces you to say, no, there will be some bad effects to things in any sort of decision, and some of these decisions are really important, and yet I still fully believe that you cannot take an innocent life intentionally. You can't do that. Even if there are situations where an innocent life is taken, it's not an immoral act because of foreseen, and that's an extreme case, of course. We mentioned your case with as we started with the Alpine case before we got to the really weird super case, the clown halberd chainsaw event.
Yeah.
But it's nice that if you might think, Anscombe's point is, you might think, no, I'm a real absolutist. Like, I believe in morality. This sounds like we're becoming relativists or consequentialists, utilitarians, this sort of thing. And I'm full on. I want to be with Thomas Aquinas and Kant and all this, and the kind of the real boys, right? But No, they have this position because this is the kind of position you have to make this distinction. If you don't, you're going to end up having a utilitarian position anyway. So it's a cool paradox in the philosophical aspect that you might think this sounds like it's making things more complicated, but it's more complicated to allow for the simplicity of certain moral truths that we just never, like for instance, lying, that we never tell lies under any circumstances, according to St. Thomas Aquinas and other moral thinkers. And this is a principle that allows you to understand how that works in the world too. So I think even though you don't have clown murderers running around, or you might not always be alpining, there are situations where you will have to deal with the world and its effects, and there'll be effects that you don't particularly want. I assume this is just like surgery. Like if you don't believe this, then you shouldn't be cutting people open. That's a bad thing. But that's not your intention. Or like there's a possibility of you might die on the table or something. Therefore, we should. No, that's might even be foreseen that it's very likely. But it's worth this risk because of the other thing, because you don't intend that. So it's an important moral distinction, as you say, though, to think about the complications and what it means to live in a world seeking the good and yet respecting the moral boundaries involved in it.
Yeah.
Any final words on
that's
double
all
effect?
I'm here for it.
Okay, well, turning to you, the listeners and the viewers who may or may not be chased by chainsaw swinging halberd men and are unequipped with poison dart frog darts. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the show, please leave a 5-star review or like and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. If you'd like to donate, you can do so on Patreon with a monthly donation. We do have an announcement, but this one is for I'm going to send this for you, Father Gregory.
I'm ready.
This is for the summer business.
Yeah, a few of us are going to the Jubilee of Youth in Rome. It's July 28th through August 3rd, and it concludes with the canonization. I can never pronounce that word. Lord, save us. The thing where Blessed Pure Giorgio Frassati becomes a saint.
It's canonated.
So you book your own travel, you book your own accommodations, but if you want to squat up with us for various events, we're going to make those known as they take shape. So you can sign up on the website just to get updates, and then as we supply them, we'll look forward to kicking it together. That's all I got.
Okay, so know of our prayers for you. Please pray for us, and we'll catch you next time on Godsplaining.
Father Bonaventure, if you had the choice between holding a toad and subscribing to a YouTube channel, what would you choose?
Subscribe to a toad holding a YouTube channel.
Oh my gosh. Please subscribe to a toad holding a YouTube channel, especially if it's ours. Cheers.